Hello, this is Malorian, and this is the Orc Tactical Team. And what we're going to be talking about today is the new difficult way that you have to do your flanking in 8th. Now in 7th it could be pretty easy. You could use throwaway units to bait and flee. I've shown this in other videos, and as long as you had the throwaway units and you could trick your opponent or force them to do it through either things like frenzy or circumstance, it was fairly easy to outsmart your opponent, outmaneuver your opponent, and get a flank. The changes in 8th, which are going to change this entire thing, is first of all, if you have say like a bait unit, where normally the bait unit's set here, here's the unit they're trying to bait, they charge, they flee, and they're over here for another unit to counter. Well, in the new rules, they can now pass a leadership test to charge somebody else. So all of a sudden, that's not looking so good. Another thing you could do is actually just take the charge too. So they take the charge, beat them, and it's either overrun and get countered, or stand there and get countered. Well, now when you win combat like that, you can reform. So you're not going to be showing the flank either. So with these things, it's going to get fairly difficult. So looking forward, some of the ways that you can use 8th rules to get the flanks is the first one, which is the easiest, is don't do anything different. Now, I know I just said that it doesn't work, but you still have to pass that leadership test. And now, I know a lot of these leaderships are going to be fairly high, leadership 9, whatever. But one of the things I remember being told back with when I used to play 40k is this idea that it's usually best to try and look for something that's the least common. So let's say you had something that would make somebody take a panic test or a leadership test, right? Well, if you did it on a unit that had low leadership, you would have high results but very low output, and so in the end, is it really even worth it? Whereas if you're to do it to something that was usually very good, it might not happen as often, but when it does happen, it makes a big deal. And so that's kind of the idea here, that you might still have these cheap little throwaway units. You might set them over here to try and redirect, and it might be 1 in every 10 games that they fail, but this could mean that 1 in every 10 games you almost automatically win just because of this huge counter that you get, and wiping out this major part of their force. So that's something to keep in mind, that it still might be worth it just to try and play the odds and see if you can get a good counter charge. The other thing is that they still have to have a legal charge to charge something else in order to do that. So if you make sure to be running ahead that throwaway unit so that there is no other legal unit for it to try and redirect into, well then all of a sudden they are forced to chase after it. So that's something you can still do there. Another one is, I was saying you could bait frenzy people or frenzied units before. Now it's if they pass leadership, they don't have to charge. So again, it might be a thing where it's worth trying. If you get a cheap throwaway unit, why not try and see if you can force them to charge after you. Now, after that, if we want to look at things where it's a little bit more certain, I'm thinking that one of the big things you're going to start seeing with infantry-heavy armies is this idea of more of a spearhead formation. And what that's going to look like is, if you think of the one line with a whole bunch of blocks going across, the main thing is that in your middle line, you're going to want your middle blocks to be like this, okay? And the way that you can make this happen is, on your first turn, either if you're going to be starting farther back, you can just deploy in that formation already. But if not, and you're having to be a little bit more aggressive, you can always, by wheeling, make things line up in the end as you move up. Now the idea of why you want to be in this spearhead formation, and for start off, you don't want to wheel up so much that you can be flanked as well. You're going to have to watch those angles. Is the idea that when the opponent charges you, they're going to hit and line up, showing their flank to your next infantry unit. And whereas, why does it have to be like this? You could have done the same thing with this. Well, you want them also, when they swing over, to be blocking the rest of their army, okay? So the idea with this is that you're going to be able to punch through their center, and by the time they get around to you, you've already destroyed their center, and you have this points tactical advantage. So that's something that I think people really are going to want to look at. Another one with, because of steadfast and things like that, you can easily throw up a big unit, a big cheap unit of infantry set up with just having tons of ranks. Just run up, wheel up, so that when they hit you, you're going to be stubborn, and then you can counter easily with your hard-hitting unit. Now, one of the things that you have to start thinking about in 8th is, do I even want to bother trying to do flanking? And the reason why I'm saying that is in 8th, if you get hit in the flank, first of all, you have to at least have 2 ranks in order to get rid of their rank bonuses. So you're going to have to flank them with something pretty serious to make it even worth it. After that, if they still have more ranks than you, they're still going to be steadfast, so it doesn't even matter if you flank them, they're still going to be stubborn. Another one is that if they lose and they pass the leadership, which is if they're not stubborn, it's modified by how much they lost by, but still, if they pass the leadership, they can reform, even if they lost, to be facing a new direction. And it still is worth it, and one thing to remember is that you can't do that reform if you're hit on 2 different sides. Okay, so here's the reason why you'd want to do the flanks. Number one, when you're hitting on the flank, you don't get all those supportive attacks, the step up. Well, I guess, if you kill up to those points, kill the back ranks, if it gets farther enough in, those guys don't get to attack anymore. But because of those fewer attacks, that means you can be flanking with this more hard-hitting unit and know that they're going to be getting less attacks back. So it's a little bit of more of a defensive way to protect your hard hitters, because not all hard hitters are that defensive. For Bretonnians, you could be thinking of your questing knights, which hit a little bit harder but have worse armor. For orcs, you could be thinking of things like squighoppers or black orcs, where sure they hit hard, but in the end they're not really even all that defensively strong. So if you can minimize the amount of attacks that are going back to them, that's obviously going to be a tactical advantage. And as I said, as long as you have the enemy on 2 fronts, they're now allowed to reform. And so as the combat goes on, you can just keep on whittling them down with those high strength attacks until their ranks are down enough that they aren't steadfast. And remember, you're getting your ranks from your first unit that's pinning them down, and at that point you can break them and get rid of them. Another thing to remember, even if, let's say you did the thing where you baited them, and then you flank, so in the end, you don't have a unit in front, you're only having a unit in flank. The reason why you'd want to do that is that just to make sure that you're going to win. Even if it is something where after that combat, sure, they pass, they're stubborn, and they might be able to reform, the main idea here is that you're going to get that one first really hard hit where you can still do all your big damage to them. They're going to get very few attacks coming back, and then in protracted combats, you've just had that one step ahead. It's kind of like getting the jump on a race or something. You've just killed a bunch of their guys before the real fight even begins. So in general, that's kind of the idea of flanking. We might have to get in some more specifics about different armies and how the way that those specific armies are going to be going for flanking, but there's a little bit, to start off with, a little bit of a general idea. Next week we're going to be talking about the new Orc and Goblin BSBs and some of the new setups you're might want to look at for those. So anyway, I'll see you next week. Bye.